Annuncio vobis gaudium magnum. Habemus papam.
Voi sapete che il dovere del conclave era di dare un vescovo a Roma. Sembra che i miei fratelli cardinali sono andati a prenderlo quasi alla fine del mondo, ma siamo qui.
A church that will not stay still, a non-static church. We can be sure that this will be the church of Pope Francis.
This has always set Bergoglio apart. A great Jesuit, a man of excellent formation. Above all, he is a man of action.
If we read Pope Francis's writings, we're going to always see this concern with going to the frontiers of poverty, of exclusion, and of those who are furthest from God.
He was always a person who had a lot of courage and plenty of bravery to stand before the powerful and say what he thought. The voice of those who had no voice. That was Cardinal Bergoglio.
A man who was kind of a desert saint and a great and brilliant administrator. The combination of these two characteristics is not very common.
Pope Francis' life has been exemplary in precisely the type of personal witness that the new evangelization calls for. He becomes a model for millions of Catholics around the world today.
A pope not only from Argentina, not only from Latin America, but a pope from the New World. A pope from the Americas, from the ecclesia in America that John Paul II dreamed of.
En América Latina se vivía también momentos complicados.
Latin America has gone through some very difficult times. But the fact that we have these great qualities and great values such as religious fervor, that strong sense of family, those cultural roots, and ancestral peoples. With this accumulation of cultural and religious wealth, which can now be shared at a universal level, this is an important moment.
For me, the election of the new Pope, Pope Francis, who is the first Pope from the American continent, is a special sign from God that we need to participate actively in the life of the Church, and that it is the time for all of us to feel the responsibility of being an important part of the life of the Church.
I was impressed by his efforts to not to be captured by the office, but to be actually himself in the service of the office of St. Peter. You know, he didn't want to only be the Pope, he wanted to be a human being. You know, he paid his own bills, he asked for a blessing of the people on the balcony of St. Peter's. And I hope he continues to exercise his individual personality in the context of his service as the Pope.
And in this Pope, we have someone who teaches by his personal witness and by the language that he uses to relate to the average person.
Colegio Máximo, buenas tardes.
He said, "Hello, this is Jorge." When he told me that he was Jorge, I asked, "The Pope?" And he said, "Yes, how did you recognize my voice?" And I told him, "How wouldn't I recognize you?" He is very humble.
And she says to me, very surprised, "The Pope is calling." And I told her, well, put him through. And he said, "Happy birthday." And I told him, "How are you, Jorge?" Well, Francis now, but he likes to be called Jorge like always. He's very close to many people and he remembers their birthdays. And so, even though he was announced as Pope, he also remembered my birthday.
Siendo Papa, se acordó que ese año cumplía años yo.
Ha salido algo que él lo ha vivido desde siempre.
He showed something he has always lived, that joy of being with the people. I believe that now he understands that his Petrine ministry is for the people.
In the days after his election, the world asked, what can we expect from this simple and humble Pope?
This is the big question that I don't have sufficient authority to answer, so I have to refer to his words. A church that will not stay still, a non-static church. We can be sure that this will be the church of Pope Francis. There is a phrase, the person who stays locked in a room will suffocate. He speaks of a church that is not self-referential, a church that reaches out to the people.
He wants a holy church, or at least one that strives to obtain virtue, and that virtue has to be demonstrated, particularly in poverty. That is why he chose the name Francis.
In his first international voyage, Pope Francis traveled to Brazil for World Youth Day in Rio de Janeiro. There, he welcomed millions of young people, challenging them to discover the transformative power of their Catholic faith.
Já está sentindo o espírito da jornada muito forte nas pessoas, elas te olham diferente quando te veem com o kit. A gente sente realmente que é uma alegria receber os peregrinos e receber o Papa.
Mas a emoção é muito grande ter um Papa dos pobres, um Papa que vai ao encontro da juventude, que anda na chuva, que pisa no chão sujo, que pisa nesse chão banhado de sangue, que muitas vezes sangue da nossa juventude.
Foi uma semana excelente, teve um astral muito bom, eu pude sentir uma paz assim que eu nunca senti há muitos anos, assim. Eu que sou uma pessoa até nova, assim, mas eu nunca havia visto aqui no Rio uma coisa tão maravilhosa como eu estou vendo agora.
We think back to the election of Pope John Paul II in the 1970s. We saw this great awakening of Christianity behind the Iron Curtain. The great challenge today is how do we deal with the new globalization of the church, where the vast majority of Catholics today live in poverty. And so now with Pope Francis may be able to do for the Western Hemisphere what John Paul II was able to do for Europe and the Soviet bloc. What a Pope does in our age can reach far beyond the Catholic Church. And the election of Pope Francis means that the poor now have the most important spiritual leader on earth as a very personal advocate for them. His election challenges everyone to look at their neighbor differently, to reach out in charity, and to understand that every life deserves our help. There is the potential for a real global reawakening of love of neighbor as a result of this Pope's leadership.
Non dimentichiamo mai che il vero potere è il servizio e che anche il Papa, per esercitare il potere, deve entrare sempre più in quel servizio che ha il suo vertice luminoso sulla croce. Deve guardare al servizio umile, concreto, ricco di fede di San Giuseppe e come lui aprire le braccia per custodire tutto il popolo di Dio e accogliere con affetto e tenerezza la intera umanità, specie i più poveri, i più deboli, i più piccoli, quelle che Matteo descrive nel giudizio finale sulla carità. Chi ha fame, sete, chi è straniero, nudo, malato, in carcere. Solo qui serve con amore sa custodire.